Do you want to intro?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Demos for Democracy sessions. We are very excited today because we're featuring Discourse, which is an open source discussion platform that attempts to reimagine what a modern, sustainable, fully open source internet discussion platform should be today. We have joining us one of its co-creators, Jeff Atwood, who is also a rock star in the tech world. He has an amazing blog on tech called Coding Horror. And for the interview, we have Luis Daniel. We both work here at the GovLab, NYU Poly. We are doing the research on the intersections of technology and public policy. And we are doing this series just to feature designers and builders with the latest innovations, trying to improve governance platforms, openness, collaboration. So welcome, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. And I'm going to give the word to Luis Daniel.
Hi. Hi, Jeff. Thanks so much for joining us and talking about Discourse. I guess to start off, could you tell us a little bit about Discourse and how you decided to you used to work on Stack Exchange and Stack Overflow, and then you left to work full-time for Discourse. So if you could talk a little bit about Discourse and how you decided to build this.
Sure, definitely. So starting in about 2008, Joel Spolsky and I founded this project, Stack Overflow, which became Stack Exchange, a network of sites. And it's a Q&A engine for technical topics. And what I learned in the 4 years that I worked at Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange was that this is really a collaborative learning tool. So we built the tool in such a way that it encouraged people to teach each other about programming. That's what we started with, of course. And one of the things that's unique about programming as a discipline is that it's always changing. And there's always somebody who knows more than you do about something because it's such a fractal level of detail in programming. So I really wanted to encourage my fellow programmers to teach each other. And it kind of evolved into this, as we got deeper into it, not really a tool for socializing, not really a tool for discussion, but a tool for learning. And we found that a lot of the social stuff kind of gets in the way of learning to some degree. You can't really learn much when everybody's having a lot of fun in the classroom. So we got a reputation of being very strict, which is interesting. And it came out of our reputation system. So one of the main observations I had about programmers is they're very peer-driven. If you want a programmer to do something, you don't tell them to do it. You tell them that someone else can do it better than they can. And they'll immediately go and do it a really, really good job. So it's this concept of sort of peer-friendly competition, really. And it feels good to be acknowledged by your peers. So the concept of upvoting and downvoting answers, which was not new to the internet, but we really internalized that, and that became sort of your peer score of like, what do the peers think of what you're posting here? Is it good information? Is it clear information? Can I understand it? Does it actually solve the question that was asked? Those sort of things. And programmers are very good at this. And it turns out this engine works really well for a lot of technical topics. And where it works amazingly. Like it surfaces, because what you get is you get the question at the top of the page, and then directly under you get the best answer because it's sorted by peer votes, right? So your peers have said, this is the best answer. This is the one that worked the best for us. And so you get this really powerful experience of getting a really clear question and a really clear answer loading in your browser very, very rapidly at the top of the page. You don't have to read through a bunch of discussion to figure out what the correct answer is. There's no discussion. It's just, here's the best answer. And if you want to keep reading, you can see 3 or 4 other answers that also work, that aren't wrong, but they're just different ways of solving the same problem because there's always more than one way to do it. So that worked great. And by 2012, we had kind of solved our core problem. I mean, the engine was in really good shape. It was doing a great job at surfacing programming questions. We expanded into other related technical fields. You can go to stackexchange.com and view all the sites that are out there. It's a very Creative Commons. Everything on Stack Exchange is Creative Commons, so all the contributions are sort of given back to the world in that sense. But when I came out of Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange in 2012, I realized that the social side of stuff was really not addressed at all by Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange. If you wanted a place to sort of hang out and talk to people, if you wanted a restaurant versus a school, you couldn't really do that on the Stack Exchange engine. And on top of that, I would get asked questions from other startups because I had come out of a successful startup, Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange. So I must know what I'm doing, which isn't really true. But they would ask me for advice, and I would say, well, look, you need to talk to your community. Don't ask me. Don't ask this erstwhile expert. Ask your community what they think of what you're doing and what you should be doing, and what's going right, what's going wrong. And they would say, oh, that's great advice. And then how do I do that? So then the difficulty was, what tool do they use to do that? How do they talk to their communities? Because this is all I did at Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange. I talked to our community. I listened to the community because they're the ones doing all the work in Stack Overflow. I'm not answering all those questions. I answer a handful, a tiny handful, but they're doing all the work in the system, and they should have a really strong say in what happens. This sense of like self-governance, right? It's of the community, by the community, for the community. It's they're building all the content. So I wanted that same philosophy in a discussion site, a more general, not Q&A, probably more social experience. And I went and looked at all the tools that were out there, and they were just embarrassingly bad. Like I was ashamed to recommend this software to people because it was so bad. A lot of the traditional discussion software has not really evolved since like 1999. And in the 4 years that I was at Stack Overflow, it hadn't improved at all. We stopped looking because I realized we weren't building a discussion platform. We were building a Q&A platform, which is a very different thing. And I assumed there had been some improvement, but there wasn't any. So Discourse, the idea with Discourse is essentially it's WordPress, but for groups, right? So a discussion platform, an open source discussion platform that has this amazing ecosystem around it and is kind of built for the next 10 years of the internet, both in terms of the technology and also in terms of the sociology. How do you get people to have discussions that are civilized, where they're not calling each other awful names, saying awful, terrible things to each other that you're ashamed to be even reading on the page. Yeah. So all this stuff, I'm trying to encourage the right behaviors with Discourse. And it's fully open source, so it's available to anyone. There's no cost associated with it. And that's the vision statement for Discourse. That's what we're trying to do. And you can see I have the window up, and our tagline is civilized discussion on the internet. Because, why is this a problem? Like, why do people associate the internet with like this horrible place where terrible things are said? It's like, it really shouldn't be this way. And the software doesn't help you figure this out. The software doesn't teach you how to govern a community. It doesn't teach you how human beings are supposed to interact online. It's like, here's how you make something bold. Here's how you reply to a topic. It's like, that's not what I need help with. What I need help with is, how do I deal with this troll? How do I deal with this incredibly negative person who's always saying terrible things to other people in my community? That's what you actually need help with, right? So that's what Discourse is trying to do. And it's a little bit like an iceberg, because a lot of Discourse is under the surface. If you look at Discourse from the outside, you're like, okay, it's a tool where I type messages to other people. But there's a lot of subtlety in dealing with human interactions with other people, and a lot of nudging that you have to do that's very, very subtle. It's not overt. Like if you go to Stack Overflow, there's a number next to every person's name. And that must represent how good that person is, right? Like a number next to your name means that's your value or worth in the world, right? Not really, but that's always how people see it, right? The number one thing you can do to affect human behavior is put a number next to someone's name. And I guarantee you they will do whatever it takes to make that number go up. It's really kind of crazy, right? It doesn't matter. This is like internet points. But the way you use these numbers next to people's names has a really profound effect on the experience. And you'll notice on Discourse there is no number next to your name. But behind the scenes, there's a bunch of stuff going on that I'll get into. So it's not as overt. It's a much more subtle system because social interactions are much more subtle. Stack Overflow is a system of data, facts, and science. Show me the data. Show me the science. Make me believe what you're saying, right? Show me the truth behind what you're saying. Prove it, basically. Whereas in social discussion, you don't have to prove that you've eaten the best hamburger in your life. Like, that's not the point of the social discussion. Is this really the best hamburger? Can you prove it? That's not the way these things work. So the incentive systems have to be a lot more subtle. So it's fun work. It's much harder than Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange. But I like that I can give it to everybody that's open source, and it actually works in a lot of scenarios where Stack Overflow, if I gave you Stack Overflow, it would just fail because it takes so much discipline to create a school. Creating a school takes incredible discipline that people really don't understand and actually aren't good at. So you can't create a school. If you tried to create a school, you probably would fail. But if you try to create a restaurant, you might make that work. because that's much more social. It's just about having a good experience with other people. It doesn't have a lot of strictness associated with, sitting down and having dinner with someone, just having a nice conversation. So anyway, that's my very long-winded intro to the Discourse project.
Oh, good. Thanks. So for Stack Overflow, as I understand, there was the process for designing was through iteration, where sort of trial and error. You have your meta Stack Exchange, where you get a lot of input from users to sort of drive the design of Stack Overflow. What was the design process like for Discourse, and how do you decide what works and what doesn't?
Well, I always start by looking at what's out there, for good, bad, and ugly. And for discussion, there's obviously a lot of discussion platforms, and the internet has done discussion for a long time. I mean, if you go back to like Usenet and, mailing lists, there's a lot of really historic data on the way people communicate online and the tools they use to communicate online. So the first thing I like to do is really survey everything that's out there, and also the things that didn't work, the failures, that may have failed because they're ahead of their time or not quite right. So that's always step one of the process, is research what's out there. When we started with the Q&A stuff, I was shocked to learn how many Q&A websites there were on the internet that I had never seen before. There were like dozens, and they were big, really big sites. So I was like, wow, Q&A is a thing, So that's step one, is, look at what's out there, research what's out there. And we built this Frankenstein monster of like, here's the things that we think are working from other sites. Like from blogs, we said, okay, the concept of authorship is really important, because if you're the author, you own it and it's your baby, right? Mm-hmm. So we pulled that concept across. We saw voting working really well on Dig, which nobody really uses Dig anymore, but Reddit. That worked really well, because I noticed when people would downvote me, like, it bothered me. Like, why does this bother me? It's like people are saying they don't like what I posted. And it actually made me really stop and reflect, like, what am I doing? Like, maybe I'm doing it wrong. I was like, wow, that's crazy. So I took that concept across. This concept of achievements, like from Xbox and from PlayStation, where, it's not the manual. You don't really read the manual before you play the game. Nobody actually does this, right? You just play the game. And the game teaches you how to play the game, right? The first level is like a de facto manual for the game. I was like, that's great. We need that. And that essentially is the badging system. And it works on a couple different levels. One is teach me the basic functions of the system, but you do it as like a scavenger hunt. You're like, oh, I can earn this badge if I figure out this other feature of the system. It's like, oh, cool. Now I know how to do X, right? But I didn't have to sit there and read a manual, because that's boring. Nobody actually wants to do that. Nobody will, in fact, do that. So it's really a process of what I call building a Frankenstein monster, saying these are the things that are working, and this is what I want to do. So with Discourse, what I said was, look, reading is fundamental. I don't know if you guys had those, high school or, middle school class where reading is fundamental riff, right? But it's so true. Any discussion, the main problem you have is people didn't read the stuff that was on the screen, right? So they have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, this happens all the time, right? It's like a running joke. Did not read, but here's my opinion on what I think you said, So in Discourse, we built all these incentive systems around make it easy to actually read all the content. So there's not this weird threading thing going on. So like you don't have to deal with like 10 levels of indent and like shifting left, shifting right in the conversation. It's just, look, just read. Just scroll down. Let the magic of gravity pull you downward, and just scroll and just read, and keep reading. And nothing will stop you from reading. There's no next page button, right? Like, oh God, next page. Like now I have to click the next page button. For why? I don't know. It's just the way it is, right? Maybe in 1999 that made sense. But on Discourse, you just keep, it's like Doritos, man. You keep eating, and we just keep making more, right? Here's some more Doritos. Keep reading. And you want to have a discussion, like if you're going to have a discussion about World War II, do you want to have that discussion with the guy who just skimmed the Wikipedia article? Or do you want to have a discussion with the guy who read, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, all 3 volumes of it, right? I think you're going to have a much better discussion with the person who actually read all the stuff. So reading is really heavily weighted in Discourse, to the extent that one of the first trust levels you get on Discourse is that you read a bunch of stuff. Awesome. You're actually here. We time everything that's on the screen, so we actually can tell you how long you read each post, literally every post in the system, because we want you to read that stuff. And that's how we start to trust you. It's like, oh, you're here and you're actually reading stuff. That's great. Versus the drive-by users, like, I saw something that makes me angry, and now I'm going to post something, right? It's not about the reading. It's about the reactionary, knee-jerk, I'm going to post something. Those are the kinds of users you don't really want. So those are some of the incentive systems that are in work, but it's basically building this Frankenstein monster of like, what is the behavior that you want to achieve? And what are the things that you see out there that help you achieve that behavior? A lot of the reading stuff is just removing friction from reading, making it really easy to just read, without stopping.
So with a coding question, for example, you get an answer and then that's how you consider that this question was a success. Is there some sort of way to measure a conversation or a discussion as successful or not?
Yeah, I think there is. Well, first of all, nobody replies, right? I mean, you do see this even if you go to Meta Discourse, and I feel bad about this. People will come in and post these really just hard to understand topics where they're like going off on these weird tangents, like I can't even understand what you're talking about, and like nobody replies to them, And I feel bad because like I don't even know what to say to these people. It's like, well, they've posted, or like the kitchen sink request, like here's the 20 things I think you guys should do in Discourse. Well, you've posted 20 things. Like, how do I reply to 20 things? That's too much, right? That you're asking me to do all this work. So I think one way to measure success or failure in a conversation is like, well, is anyone talking? I mean, are people actually posting the topic, right? And there's a variety of reasons this can fall apart. And we focus on a lot of the mechanical stuff on Discourse, which is how easy is it for me to post, in a way that encourages me to read, by the way, not I'm going to stop at the first thing that makes me angry and post a reply, because that's pretty much how dudes work, right? Like I see the first thing that makes me angry and now I'm going to like immediately post. So you want to encourage people to reply sort of at the bottom of the topic where, you've actually read everything. And you'll notice that on Discourse, we do that. If you're not logged in, the login to reply button is kind of at the bottom of the page at the end of the discussion. So I think for discussion, and because it's so social, it's just, is anyone there? It's like a party. It's like a party where you go in the room and like there's nobody in the room. There's like a table with pizza and like one person standing there. It's like, is this a party? Is this fun? Nobody is showing up, right? So challenge number one is sort of getting people to show up and getting people to talk about the topics that you want them to talk about, right?
Cool. So do you have any success stories where there was this organization or this community that had a particular problem with their discussions and that Discourse sort of came in and saved the day?
Well, I do. I think Discourse is a tool that's designed to build actual communities. And one problem I see a lot online is people mistake the let's put comments at the bottom of a web page with an actual community. And there's nothing wrong with this model. I mean, if you want comments at the bottom of your page, that's fine. But it's not really a community. And one place we saw this was Boing Boing, one of our earliest partners. And I'm a big fan of Boing Boing. There's this online culture zine that's been around since like the mid 90s, forever. And they have a history of experimenting with solutions like this. And they contacted me and they were like, we're thinking about just completely disabling commenting because we have Discuss or however it's pronounced, which is, comments at the bottom of every article. And they were deeply unhappy with the results they were getting. And I said, I think Discourse will work with you because we'll work for you in this, because what Discourse is designed to do is build a clubhouse for your community. It's not a little constrained area where you can have conversations on a web page. It's an actual place where the community goes and has some say in what's actually going on there. It's a system of governance. Like, what should we be talking about? How should we be talking about this? Who should be allowed to talk here? What is the purpose of this discussion? All these things are valid topics in Discourse. Whereas if you're on a bottom of a web page, you're like, well, I don't think the way you guys run this website is correct. That doesn't fit at the bottom of a web page on an article, a blog post someone wrote, right? This is completely outside the context of that individual discussion. There's no place to have what I call meta discussion, which is all about governance. It's all about leadership. And when you stifle that kind of stuff, when all you have is this little narrow slot, like graffiti wall at the bottom of a web page, you're missing a lot of the things that actually tie communities together. So on Boing Boing, they were ready to just turn the whole thing off. They were like so upset with the way it was going. They were like, we're going to turn this off. And with Discourse and Boing Boing, you can go to boingboing.net and check it out yourself. It's just the forum or BBS link at the top of the page. You actually get a sense of community. It's like, whoa, these people are here in the clubhouse with me, day in, day out, right? It's not this drive-by graffiti wall of like whoever on the internet happens to hold a cookie on Discuss will leave some random comment on the blog article. It's like they go to the clubhouse, they get a little ID card, right? You have to log in. I mean, that is required in most communities. And they kind of hang out here with us, right? And they stick around over time. It's not this drive-by commuter community of people doing these strafing runs. You know, I see some topic that triggers me, and I'm just going to, you know, do my strafing run in my jet to just, you know, leave some random comment, right? You're sort of there for the medium to long term with these people and sort of learn the culture. And you learn, like there's this thing on BBS called look at this banana. I don't know why, but Cory Doctorow, you learn the personalities of the people there. And there's this theme of like, look at this banana thing. And everybody will just post like, look at this banana thing. And it's just a thing, right? Like you would know if you're a part of that community. And you would learn it if you were part of that community. But if you're just doing this drive-by commenting system, you never really get that sense of, you know, this is who we are. This is what we do, you know? There's just no culture around it. And there's certainly no governance and no leadership. So we did see that on BBS, on Boing Boing, where you sort of got a much stronger sense of like, these are my people. You know, this is where we hang out. This is what we do. And it's not for everyone, right? Boing Boing has a certain worldview that you may or may not like. But it's fun. You know, it's a very quirky culture. I personally enjoy it. So anyway, I encourage you to check out Boing Boing. It's a really good example of a discourse that's been around over a year now. So
now I'm going to open the floor, Jeff, so that if any of our participants want to ask you a question, maybe you can give a brief intro, 30 seconds of who you are, why are you listening to Jeff,
there's a question on the chat that was, I guess, accidentally just sent to me instead of to all. The question comes from Arnaud, who is the CTO here at GovLab. He's asking about civic innovators. What model do you think would work best, the sort of school versus restaurant, Stack Overflow versus Discourse? And I guess the question is sort of like, well, yeah, okay, well, let's do with civic innovators specifically. What do you think?
Well, getting into the issue of, you know, learning versus education, I mean, these are two opposing concepts to some degree. I mean, they can work together. I mean, you can have educational games, and I think educational games are very, very powerful. But I think you got to say, what's the goal? Is the goal to have a school where everybody goes there and learns something? Or is the goal to have a place where I learn to socialize with this group, right? It's a question of moving that slider from how social is it to how much learning there is. The more social it is, the less learning is going to go on. You'll still get some learning, you know, but it's a question of you got to identify your core values. For these are almost extremes. On the Stack Overflow side, it's very far on the learning side. Stack Overflow does not tolerate, you know, entertainment, basically. I mean, only to a very, very limited degree. It's like, what can I learn from this? That's the immediate question everybody's going to ask when you post something. Did you post something we can learn from? If the answer is no, or if the answer is like, this is actively counter-learning, like this is a lolcat, right? This is going to make me laugh, but there's no way anyone could really learn anything from this, then it's frowned upon. So it's really a question of where you want to move that slider, you know, what your goals are. Is it a learning community, or is it a community of socializing? And there's nothing really wrong with either one of those things. You just have to decide, like, what is your goal as an org? You know, is it, do you want socialization, or do you want a really strong emphasis on learning? Are you building a school or a restaurant? So this is
Arnaud again. So I would not like to phrase the question in those terms. I think that what we are trying to achieve in the civic innovation space is more like solving problems. And so sometimes you solve problems by, so in my case, I go to Stack Overflow and, you know, I search for the latest bug I encountered developing software X, and I find a great answer. But sometimes just knowing like who the expert is and just like being able to have like a private conversation with the expert is the best solution. And I would argue that for people working in government at whatever level, they might be more familiar with this kind of interaction. So how can you combine the two? And my question would be like, what kind of social features, not in the entertainment sense, but more on the person-to-person connection sense, do you have built in the system?
Well, Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange really discourage individual interactions because everything is supposed to be, you know, a public artifact that, you know, thousands hundreds minimum of people can learn from. In fact, if you post something that only helps one person, that's really frowned upon. If it's some really specific problem specific to your site, your org, it's frowned upon. That's not really going to help at least 10 or 100 people. Whereas, Discourse it's a much more, discussion is a much more flexible tool. Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange are scalpels. They're really sharp and really awesome if you're doing surgery. But like if you give the average person a scalpel, they're probably going to hurt themselves because it's a really sharp tool. It's designed to do something very, very specific and almost requires a professional to handle. Whereas Discourse is more like a table knife. It's like, look, you need to cut something, So here's a table knife. You probably won't hurt yourself. It's not super sharp, but it'll do most of the cutting that most people want to do. And you can use it to eat food, right? You're not going to use a scalpel to eat your food. So I would say that Discourse is, if you have the idea of, hey, there's an expert, and I want to hang out with this expert, I want to follow this expert. Discourse is a much closer map to that kind of model, right? Where you can actually really easily click through and see all their posts. You can interact with them on a regular basis. You can private message them. There is no concept of private messaging on Stack Overflow by design.
And so are there some features related to finding the right people based on, expertise that they have or, location? Like for me, I'm a big soccer fan, and let's say I am a mayor of a Russian city, and I need to host the World Cup. So what I would like to do, I would like to find some, mayors in various cities of various countries who recently hosted the competition in order to ask them questions about like transportation, funding, relationship with FIFA, and stuff like that. So are there some features in Discourse that make some kind of a refined structured search possible?
Well, we do have structured search, and actually I'll switch windows here since we're getting into questions about the software itself. So let me
Jeff, do you mind extending a little on the time, or do you need to finish at some point?
No, we can extend a little bit. That's fine. So one thing I would recommend is, and this is our sandbox, so it's going to have a little bit of kind of random content. But if you're looking for somebody who has expertise in a particular category, one thing I would recommend, of course, is starting by browsing that category. Like here's the tech category. We do have a structured search. In fact, we just improved it. So you can see it sort of highlights the results. It shows you what category the results are in. You're getting matches on users and so forth. There are advanced query terms where you can sort of drill into certain categories, drill into certain users. You can certainly go through and see everything I've posted.
The tags, are they like automatically defined by the system? Are they defined by the community manager? Are they crowdsourced?
We have a system of categorization, which is fairly strict. That reflects sort of the more traditional view of discussion, where you have essentially the Android people and the iPhone people, and they probably shouldn't be in the same area together because they have totally different devices. Categories is kind of a hard distinction. Let me go back to the category list, and we can look at that. So here's the list of categories that are available on this site. It's not longer term. We're going to get into some tagging stuff that users can do. I'm a little bit down on that because what I've seen with Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange is users are really bad at tagging. There's this sort of romantic idea that users are really good at this, but the reality is they're awful at it. And you really only want your expert users categorizing things. So Discourse reflects that experience where the categories are essentially set up by your moderators, right? And everything goes in fairly strict buckets. I mean, if you want to have buckets, you don't have to have buckets. You could have everything be uncategorized. That's fully supported in Discourse. But drilling into your specific request, one thing I want to get to that we don't currently do, if you go to my profile, and this is again on the sandbox, you can see all the posts I've made on the sandbox, and you can sort of scroll in and see, well, what categories does this person tend to post in? One thing we don't do that I would like to do is highlight sort of my best responses here. There is this concept of likes received here. So all the content in Discourse, people can like it. It's just a generic expression of whatever you want to call it, agreement, kudos, I liked what you posted, this worked for me. It works in a bunch of different dimensions. We don't have any concept of downvoting because I believe in social systems, you don't really want downvoting. Nothing's objectively wrong. within a discussion, really. So what we could do here, and one thing I want to get to, is highlighting my best contributions, the things people like the most, my greatest hits, right? Mm-hmm. What things did I post that people really, really love? And I'll show you on BBS, we have a badging system that kind of does this. If I go to the badges here, and we look at, let's see, great post. So here's the post that received 50 likes, right? So this is sort of one way you could sort of identify people. Say the category is transportation. Unfortunately, we're not showing the category here, but you could say, who's posted the most liked things in the transportation category, for example. But you can certainly view these and see like why 50 likes is actually a lot. Because likes are very public. One thing I found with Discourse is when you make a like public, it's a public affirmation. You're putting your name on the person's post. People are really careful about when they do that because their name goes on it versus the anonymous upvoting system in Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange, which is, again, data, in fact, and science-based. But putting your name on it essentially lets you see, is this cronyism? Do these 5 people just always like their, the stuff within their little group? Or is it like actually getting support from the community, right? So, you can drill through. Like, I don't actually know what I'm going to get here. But yeah, this is just a statement of like essentially how there's a lot of prevalent racism, right? And that 64 people like this. So if I click this, you can see all the individual people that actually like this.
So how would you define a community or the scope of a community? So we were looking at Stack Overflow as maybe like creating a specific Stack branch for civic innovation, but it was hard to actually define properly the community. Are we talking about like innovators, tech people? Are we talking about like policymakers? Do you see like the same issue when defining like the terrain or the scope of a community with Discourse?
Well, yeah. I mean, Discourse is a much more general purpose tool. One reason I'm kind of glad Stack Overflow is not open source is because most of the time when we give people the engine, there was a time when we were selling the engine. It wasn't really my idea. It ends usually badly because it takes so much discipline to set up a school. It takes so much discipline to set up even a community college, and it's hard. But discussion systems are much easier to maintain and much easier to set up because all you need is basically a critical mass of people that essentially like hanging out with each other and get value however you measure value. Like on Stack Overflow, we measure value by utility to the world. If you're not generating useful stuff, then you really shouldn't be there. But that's a difficult thing to pin down. Define useful, Mm-hmm. I think it's easier for programmers. It's easier for, very strict sciences. But it's much, much harder in the context of social discussion. So I do think that Discourse is much less likely to fail. If you deploy a Discourse and it doesn't work out, the worst case scenario is you'll have, maybe 5 or 6 people that come there and kind of like talking to each other and are getting something out of that interaction. And that's fine. That's what Discourse is designed to do. And the good news is because Discourse has an immune system, because those 5 people will eventually gain some fairly powerful abilities as they participate in the system. They become mini moderators basically over time. There's this concept of automatic escalation of long-term reliable participants into long-term really moderators. So if there's spam, they can just deal with it immediately, right? They don't need a moderator to come in from the outside and do it. So nothing bad will happen if you have a small Discourse and you deploy it. If nobody comes, then nothing happens. But as long as a few people come, it gets its own immune system of what the community wants there. So,
can I ask one more?
Okay, last one.
Yeah, sorry. So when I was working for Google, my favorite question was like, let's say that I show you a lamp, and inside the lamp there is so this is a lamp. Inside the lamp there is a genie. I'm going to rub the lamp, and the genie is going to emerge and grant you 3 wishes. So for Discourse, what would the 3 wishes be? And the genie is like borderline almighty, so you can think big.
Okay.
And of course, there is 0 guarantee that the genie is going to grant your wishes, but please.
Okay. Wishes for people
Discourse.
Using Discourse, or wishes for me?
For you as the creator of Discourse, I would say.
Okay.
you are a very big altruist and you only care about your users, whatever you want?
That's a tough question. I think one is kind of generic and kind of, a little weaselly, but I'm going to use it anyways. Like, I do wish we had a little bit more resources. Right now, we do have some basic venture capital funding, but I wouldn't mind having twice as many people to work with me to move this thing forward. I like to go really fast, and I'm very impatient, which is a problem when you have children, but can be an asset. I like to go really fast, so I would like to have more people to work with me on this.
Could you leverage the open source element of the project to have like some modules or components that you would like to see? Okay.
Yeah, no, it is open source. We get a great, variety of contributions, but there's a vast divide between 2 hours per night and somebody who wakes up and spends 8 hours per day, 5 days a week on a project. Vast divide between these, even in the aggregate, right? Okay. And the other thing is Discourse is a pretty aggressive project in terms of our technology stack. We're really building for devices that don't exist yet, right? Like, we're assuming everybody's going to have essentially an iPhone 6, basically, right? Like, that's going to take a few years to really happen. Okay. So the other maybe wish I had is that, well, that's not really a wish. Yeah, I think my main wish is really just, I wish I had more resources in terms of people. I mean, we're making great progress. The open source part is going beautifully. In fact, I'll show you on GitHub, we have a great list of contributors. In fact, you can see we have 389 contributors, right?
Do you have a list of the stuff you would like to build? Because there might be some elements that would be like key to like civic innovation in general, then that maybe could be funded through foundation or, things like that.
Perhaps. I mean, I've had very mixed results pursuing sort of nonprofit style funding for this. I find that the venture capital, when you can get it, is a lot easier to get, assuming you can push the right magic buttons that produce the desired output. But you can see here these are the team members, right? This is Sam Safran. There's me. Reiking was our team intern. So you do get a lot of contributions. There's 389 people on this list, but you can see it's very, very tiny. And Discourse, part of it's just time. I mean, I guess my second wish is just it takes the time it takes to build long-term projects like this. Open source is not a Instagram model. It's not where you're going to explode inside a year or 2 years. Open source is a long bet. It's a marathon. It's like, you start and you just do the work, man. Year after year, you do the work. And eventually, you can see this with WordPress. Our spirit animal is WordPress. And if you look at WordPress in 2004, you probably wouldn't have liked it. I doubt you would have used WordPress circa 2004. It just took the time it took for WordPress to get to be this really mature, really awesome open source solution. So part of it is not even a wish. It's just, I like doing the work. I wake up every day and I love working on Discourse. I love working with these communities. I love unlocking these great interactions between people. It's ultimately, social, right? It's like I want people to have platforms that belong to them where they can set the rules. They can say, look, these are the behaviors that are acceptable to us. This is the content that's acceptable to us. These are our goals. They don't have to be my goals. And they can just take it and run with it. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I love that. So maybe wish number 2 is just time. It just takes the time it takes. There's no, rocket button you can really push with open source. It's network effects. It's time invested. It's, improving the tool over time. It's like building a pyramid. You build a pyramid by moving one giant block, one, unit per day. That's how you build a pyramid. You don't just wake up one day and the pyramid's totally complete. So maybe that's wish number 2 is just time. Now, feature-wise, you did ask about that, so I will actually bring this up. I actually changed release. Sorry, little typo. So we do have a release schedule. Something we came up after version 1.0, as you can see here, and let me get rid of that time thing. So you can sort of see what's going to be in each version of Discourse. Now, I don't do this with a ton of fidelity right now because I like to build what I call complaint-driven development. I like to build the things that people are actually complaining about versus what we're imagining might solve theoretical problems. I have a whole blog entry about this called Development. And I really believe in this. This concept of a complaint-driven development is very powerful. And the idea is that, you build basically this. Get your software in front of as many users as you can. Listen to them. filter the top 3 things that they tell you are broken and fix it. And then just keep doing that over and over and over. And we've been doing that, and Discourse is really quite good. Discourse is, I mean, dramatically better than where we were a year ago, but I believe deeply in this process of get people actually using your software and then listen to what they're telling you. Now, there's a lot of noise in the signal. I'm not going to lie to you. 90% of the feedback you're going to get is going to be basically you can't use it for a variety of reasons. Not because it's not well-intentioned, but just that's the way it is. But the 10% of feedback that you get that's like really on target and really reflects sort of like where you want to go with Discourse and meets actual needs that people have versus some pet concern that somebody has, that you're hearing a lot, those are really valuable. And the more you do that and the faster you do that, you really end up with something pretty amazing at the end of that, in my opinion. So that's what we're doing. So since you asked about releases, so we're currently working on version 1.1. You can see here we have fancy code names as you're required to have with software. But basically, it's like everything we couldn't quite get into 1.0, plus the stuff that people are paying us for that we feel like we need to build, go in there. And you can see, you know, end of October, which is coming up, right? So that's our 1.1 release. One feature of Discourse, you can see a linked discussion here in the right column. So the 1.2 release links to the 1.1 release. So I click here and bam, I'm on the 1.2 release. And you can see that we're extensibility and performance are the 1.2 targets. So I don't know if I can actually come up with a third whoosh. I'm not a big whoosh guy. I'm more like, I'm about execution.
Okay.
I'm about the next
so the genie is going to replace your third wish by, you know, a last question. So how would you define like success? What would success look like for you?
Success looks like a couple things. It first of all looks like GitHub, right? Like, you know, how many people care about my project? You can see we have 12,000 stars, or, you know, 12,200 stars. Certain number of forks, some are watchers. Do people care? You know, does anyone care about what you're building? Is it actually getting used? You build these kind of houses with the idea that people will live in them. I don't build a house because I enjoy the process of building a house. I mean, I do to some extent. You build a house because it feels good to have people live in their house and have a really great home that they've built for themselves. That's what feels really good about building software. So I want to build houses that people live in and use, and being open source is a huge, huge part of that. I can't show you our internal dashboard that we do get version pings. If you go, and actually, if you want to set up Discourse, there's a really good, let me show you a blog, discourse.org. You can install Discourse in under 30 minutes in the cloud. I'm very proud that we got this far with our project. We have an actual really, for an open source project, let me tell you, this is a very good install process. I mean, it's not, you know, one button click. Maybe, you know what, I'll use that as my third wish. My third wish would be I could build a push this giant red button and get a Discourse, right? We're not quite there yet, but you can see there's not a ton of steps here. I'm going to just scroll through this. But if you go to the install, it's not terrible. And then here, bam, right here, I have a Discourse up and running, right? It could be better. So that maybe I'll go ahead and use that as my third wish. So getting back to that, all those sites ping us for version information because we want them all to be on the latest version because we're moving really fast, and you know, it's just everybody should be up to date. Tracking sort of how many Discourses are out there and how many people are using them. And also on a personal level, like when I go to, you know, for example, bbsboingboing.net, I participate in these discussions, you know, like you can look at my participation history here and see. I posted something actually that was kind of funny, which was about candy corn, and people liked it. And, you know, that feels good, right? Because candy corn is really disgusting. I just want you guys to know it's by far the most disgusting Halloween candy that there is. So, you know, how do these discussions feel? And for the most part, they feel really good. People are having fun. They're talking. You can see that it's very interactive, like the images people are posting, Wikipedia links people are posting that are interesting. This is a discussion about root beer, by the way. I think at some point that root beer. Did you guys know root beer is based on wintergreen? Did you know that? Yeah. Wintergreen is apparently the base flavor of root beer, which blows my mind. But anyway, and yeah. There's a funny image of a camel biting a guy's head. You know, this is all good, right? People are having fun. This is a party that's fun that I would want to be a part of. And I look at a lot of our sites and say, would I want to be a part of this? Am I proud to be associated with this or ashamed to be associated with this? So part of it's like a gut feel thing, not just the numbers of how many people use Discourse, but like when I go there, how do I feel? You know, how does it look? How does it make me feel? You know, would I want to be a part of this? Yes or no?
So Dinora pleaded and begged for one more question from her.
Yes,
and then that's it. Yes.
Yes. Sorry, Jeff. Can I?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So I was going through your blog and something really caught my attention. I think at some point I found a link about Clay Shirky giving a talk on what can the internet teach us about love. And I was wondering, you that have so much experience with online communities, is there something that online communities can teach, offline communities can teach organizations, institutions that could like really work good and better if we translated that scheme into our offline world?
Okay, so let me make sure I understand the question. So this is about translating online community into offline community? Is that what I'm hearing?
What aspects of the online community interactions could be cool to translate into how we interact in offline or within an organization, within our governments, something like that?
Sure. Well, I think the main lesson of, you know, interconnectedness, right? Like as a programmer, you know, I started out in the 80s and, you know, with my little home computers, and there was no concept of, other than modems, which were very, very slow. It's like this drip feed of interaction with other people, and on the phone, right? Like if your mom picks up the phone, you get kicked off because, you know, the connection is interrupted. That, you know, everything is really interconnected. And the internet does such a brilliant job of letting people build things that other people can find and letting people connect in ways that were really impossible before. Like the Discourse team has members in France, Australia, Canada, and India. Now, 20 years ago, how would I have worked with these people? How would this have even been possible, you know? So I think the main lesson for for offline communities is to explore that loose sense of connection through the internet, where you're actually getting this amazing product, this amazing, you know, thing that you're creating in a very disconnected way. And it still works because my partner, Joel Spolsky, for a long time was like, you know, everybody has to be in the same room. We have to have lunch together. Like there's no way any kind of team coordination can work unless we're all in the same room. And you still see this in a lot of organizations. And I don't believe this. You know, I think that that's important on an ongoing basis. To have connection, to have physical connection with the people you work with is also good. But I think there's more that offline can learn from online in the sense of these loose connections are really, really powerful, to where I have people online that I've never met that I feel some ways closer to than people that I physically know, you know? And I think that's an incredibly powerful concept because of the things you can do with it, right? It unlocks all this collaboration in this loosely connected fashion that lets you build amazing things. Like Clay Shirky says, and I think this is a brilliant point, that Wikipedia is the collection of like billions and billions of fractional units of work that before this were absorbed by who knows what, television? I mean, how would you contribute some fractional thing to Wikipedia? Like, how is that even possible, right? So fractional units of work and being disconnected end up producing these incredible, I mean, Wikipedia is like, you know, that's like one of those, you know, massive achievements for civilization, I think, that we created this thing. And it just isn't possible unless you're loosely connected and you're connected to the internet. That's what unlocked that. And I love to see things like that. So, I mean, that's kind of a weird wishy-washy answer, and I apologize, but
that's good.
You know, that's where we are. And I do still like physical meetups. Like even on the Discourse team, we meet up once per year. We pick some location. This year it was in Toronto. Next year it's going to be in Australia, and we all fly there and we hang out for a week together. I think you should periodically be physically connected as a complementary part of the disconnected experience. I think those are they work together.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much. I know we went a little over time, but thank you so much for sharing with us. Dinora, do you have anything?
No, thank you. Thank you for joining us. It was a great opportunity for us and for everyone to learn about your work and the insights you have with it. So thank you. We're very grateful for your time.
You're welcome. And I hope Discourse I hope Stack Exchange is useful to you guys. I hope Discourse is useful to you guys. Really, I encourage you, like, you know, try an install of Discourse. It really is pretty easy. Play with the sandbox, play with the live customer sites, and it's cool because, this is a tool, it's free. It's available to everyone. And everything that goes into it makes it better for, the next person that uses it, which I love.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
All right.
See you.
Ciao.
Bye, everybody.